Yo, what is up? This is bootcamp day 2. All right, and without further ado, let's just get into this bitch. All right, before we get into this bitch, I actually want to do something. Actually, all right, we're gonna be learning about market maker models in AMD, but we're gonna do something real quick. All right, on YouTube. All right, we're gonna do a little bit of a breathing exercise. I like to do this sometimes, like if I'm feeling like a little nervous, right? Like pre-market, right? So I'm just let y'all have this little exercise, right? So it's size just follow this little guide, right? I might hit it actually. I'm gonna put you on these headphones so I can hear what he's saying. Right, so you'd basically just breathe here, right? And it calms you down a little bit, right? Because like all your like tensity and shit. Damn. Hold on. I'll probably talk after, but the air is basically just like kind of putting everything. I think it's getting like. Anyways, right. I would like to do that. I just do this like I might not do like all the rounds. I'll do like 1 or 2 rounds. You really cannot see me, bro. But I'll do like 1 or 2 rounds, right, before market opens or whatever. It really just calms you down or whatnot. So I just like to do that pretty much. But other than that, let's get into this. Just market maker model AMD full jazz, right? So what are market maker models, right? So MXMM, what is it, bro? So right, it's either what is the X actually? What is the X? X is a good question, right? So the X, right? X is basically damn. It's either buying or selling, right? So if you were in a sell model, right, you'd write it MSMM, right? Market maker sell model, and then if you're buying, right, you'd be in a market maker buy model, right? Cool, you got that out of the way, right? So now we know what the X is, right? So cool. How do we identify them, right? That's where AMD comes in, right? This is very, very quick with it, right? So how do we identify, damn, if I can spell, a sell, sell model or a buy model, right? How do we identify a sell model or a buy model, right? And that is with whatchamacallit, AMD. Damn, niggas don't know how to spell identify, bro. Holy fuck. With AMD, right? So what is AMD, right? As we can see in our pretty little charts, right? AMD is over here, right? So the accumulation, right? So I'll have this right here, right? So this would be accumulation. Oh my goodness, bro. Accumulation. Is that how you spell it, bro? Please say I'm right. I promise you guys, like, okay. Wait. Fuck it, bro. Actually, accumulation. We're just going to put A. Right, so this is the accumulation, right? This is the manipulation, right? The manipulation. Holy shit. Manipulation, right? And this is the distribution, right? So this would be the distribution, right? Right. And why are we distributing to accumulation, right? That would be, why is the distribution targeting the like accumulation, right? So the accumulation, because it is holding liquidity. Woo! The spelling is off the charts today. Liquidity. Oh my gosh, hopefully that's correct, bro. I don't even think that's correct, right? So why is it doing that, right? It is holding liquidity, right? So liquidity being all these low resistant highs and lows that we have in here, right? So oh my gosh, if we were to take this, right, so and put it over here, right? Oh my gosh, we're just gonna drag this, right? This would be the A, right? This would be the manipulation, right? And this would be the distribution. Okay, holding liquidity, right? And what type of liquidity is it? It's low resistance liquidity. LQ. We're gonna type that as LQ. Low resistance liquidity, right? Okay, so we know that we want to target the accumulation, right? And yeah, that's all we know so far, right? So, but what is liquidity, right? What is liquidity? What is this thing called liquidity, right? So the market has highs and lows, right? So obviously it's gonna go like this, gonna go like this, gonna go like this, gonna go like this, right? It's kind of accurate, right? Like this. Let's just do a buy model, right? So obviously you'd have your accumulation, right, being over here, right? Your accumulation being over here, right? And most of the times you would like it to accumulate next to a PD array or a unmitigated gap, right? So unmitigated gap. We'll go over what an unmitigated gap is later, but just keep in mind we like to see accumulation next to a unmitigated gap to target, right? Since it's building up liquidity, right? Being these highs and lows, right? High, 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 right? That we haven't taken out yet, right? So if we swept this high like this, right? Would this be liquidity? Yes, right? This would be higher resistance, right? It could be higher resistance liquidity, but it's still liquidity. It's just highs and lows pretty much, right? So liquidity pretty much highs and lows, right? So how we would identify this on the chart, right? If we go on to, oh shit, please don't move. Don't just fucking move this over here. Okay. How we would identify this on the chart, right? So we have our high, we have our highs, we have our highs, right? It's just highs, and then we have our lows, we have our lows, we have our lows, and that's pretty much it, right? So these highs and lows here are liquidity, and even these smaller highs and lows that we have in here are liquidity as well, right? But it's just lower significant liquidity because these points, right, are the tops and bottoms of the ranges, right? So I'll be going over like ranges and shit in like a different video, but this is pretty much it so far, right? So we have our highs and we have our lows, and that's pretty much it, right? So as you can see here, we're kind of doing this little tango in this section, right? So we're kind of accumulating over here, right? Okay, we're accumulating, right? Being we're gathering these highs and lows, right? And not taking out the highest like high in this range, right? So respecting this high, going lower, going higher, then disrespecting this low, right? Going high, going lower, creating a new low, creating a new high that's lower than this high, right? So we're just building up these high points, right? And taking out these low points, right? So taking out another low here, we're making another high. We're taking out another low here, right? We're taking out this low, right? Create a new low, and we take out this low over here, right? And then we make a new high, right? And then guess what? We close above that high, right? We start to close above this high, right? And then we create a new higher high right here, right? And guess what? We close above that high, we create a new higher high. Cool. Right? So what made this shift and change, right? So if we look over here, right, we swept another like range low, right? So out of this range is low, right? What do? Right, we were obviously accumulating, right? We accumulated here. How did we get there? We displaced, right? Obviously we were displacing. We had another accumulation phase. We manipulated the low of the accumulation, right? So manipulating the low of the accumulation or tapping into a PD array over here, right? So let's say we sweep the low, tap into a PD array. So what happens after we sweep the low and tap into the PD array, right? We obviously start to reverse, right? Targeting what? The low resistance liquidity and this accumulation, right? So we would mark this out as manipulation, right? So this whole leg would be a manipulation leg over here, right? Manipulation. All right, what did it manipulate? This low, okay? And then guess what we started to do after that? We started to distribute where? To the accumulation high. Okay, cool. All right, and you can just identify it just like this. We can have another example. I mean, these are just random ass chart examples that I'm finding out. Like, let's go. This is kind of chop. This is just like another accumulation phase over here, right? What are we doing? Okay, highs, lows. We're just chopping around pretty much, right? So this would be another point of accumulation, right? So we have our accumulation high. Actually, what are we doing here? This is like a really bad example, so I'm trying to give you all like anything in the market that y'all could like come across, right? So this is like really bad PA, but we're still gonna cover this, right? So we have our highs, right? Making a new high, right? What are we doing? We created a low, right? We respected this low, so we haven't manipulated that low yet, but looks like we did, right? We created a new low, all right? Created a new high, right? Created a new low, respecting that low, creating a new high, that's taking out that high, created a new low, that respected, that took out this low, created a new high, created a new low. So we haven't manipulated anything yet, right? Since obviously this is our range low and this is our range high, right? And then we take out this high, right? And then what do? We start to take out this low. All right, so what do we have here, right? So we have accumulation, right? Our accumulation here. We obviously disrespect this low. All right, we start to disrespect this low here. And then what do we have? We have range low down here. All right, so this would be marked as our accumulation. And then this would be marked as our manipulation over here. Since we manipulated this high over here and decided to just respect these highs, right? Even though these are a part of the accumulation phase, right? Still, we respected this high and then closed below lower, right? So in our examples, right? Let's try to find these bitches. So example, right, of a sell model, right? We start to accumulate, right? As soon as we disrespect these lows, right? Disrespect, I'm gonna actually have these, have it like this, right? We disrespect, right? We disrespect the most recent low, right? And then proceed to respect any PD array, gap, whatever you have in here, right? We could also take that as the distribution phase, right? And we can know that our manipulation is done, right? Because we also have a sweep of a higher low, right? A liquidity sweep. And then now we have our like change in character, right? This is what it would technically be called, right? Change in character, right? So take out this high, right? And then what do? Let's see if it takes out any highs in here. We have this high, this high, this high, created these three highs, right? These low resistant highs, right? And just proceeds to go lower, right? It doesn't take out anything, doesn't take out anything until like right about here, right? And then after, right, it revisits that, right? We can take this as the distribution, right? Because what is it doing? Okay, I already marked that. We can take this as the distribution because what is it doing? It is respecting the highs, right? Obviously, and whatchamacallit, it's just wanting to take out all of these range lows, right? Also, we could probably take a buy model, right, towards this high, right? Because what are we doing over here? We have a change in character here. We have lows, right? We have these highs. Create new lows. Create highs, right? So this is obviously now our change in character, right? After sweeping out this low, right? And we can take longs here, or we could just wait till shorts, short here, right? You get the gist, right? So that's just highs and lows, liquidity, what is liquidity, all that good jazz, right? So obviously this won't work if you're just using liquidity sweeps in breaker structures and doing all that good jazz, right? You need a PD array, right? So what you would like to see, right, as I said, and over in this kind of section, right, you want to see it accumulate right next to a unmitigated gap, right? And then you want to see a sweep of a high resistance. So high resistance or ITM low, right? Intermediate low is just a low that's in a gap, right? So if you had a gap, right, and we were, let's say we had accumulation. Okay, that's the wrong thing. We had accumulation here where you're accumulating, right? Actually, let's say we ran higher, right? We want to run higher, right? We start accumulating. Okay, we start accumulating, we tap into a gap, we go higher, and then we sweep out this low, right? So to distribute. Oh my gosh. Did that just delete it? Okay, we're gonna redo that. Okay, let's put in more conditions, right? So we have a gap that we want to target, right? Let's say we have a unmitigated gap that we want to target, right? Unmitigated gap that we want to target, right? And let's say price goes higher, starts to accumulate, manipulates this gap, right? Goes higher, sweeps this gap, and then goes higher, and that's it, right? So boom, 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 boom. Hold on, let me fix this up a little bit. Okay, and great. Okay, cool. So intermediate low would be this low right here, right? So this would be the ITM low. So the intermediate low, right? So the low that hit the gap, right? So it hit the gap, right? And then we just wanted to retrace into the gap one more time before actually displacing. That would be the intermediate low, right? So you need a sweep of a high resistance intermediate low and a tap into a gap into a P array to help us displace higher, right? Because if we don't have this, right, it could also just be continuing the chop and chop and chop and chop down, right? So, okay, after we get the sweep of an intermediate low and tap into a PD array, we could take this setup just right here and there, right? We could just take this, targeting the unmitigated gap, CE of the gap, or just like the high of the gap, or even the low resistant highs, right? So we could take this setup right here, and we'd be all fine and dandy, right? So that's not bad, right? Or we can take the distribution, right? It can accumulate again, right? So it can just accumulate again, tap into another high time frame gap P array, right? And we can take the continuation to that trade, right? Most of the times, right? This continuation, right, is going to have a higher win rate most of the time because it's just continuing the trend, right? So how can we identify what we're sweeping, right, and do all this, right, on the charts, right? Cool. We'd have to go to a higher time frame, right? Let's actually try to identify a gap. Sorry, I'll try to help you identify some gaps. We're going to delete all this. Hopefully y'all screenshot it. If not, go back and screenshot, right? So cool. start on the daily time frame. Always start on the daily time frame. Why? Right? Because you can see where price wants. You can just see where price wants to go. I'm not going to write that out. Okay. Start on the daily time frame. Always, right? Always when you're waking up, start on the daily time frame. See what's going on, right? So we have this obvious low, right? Actually, we're just going to start from today. We're going to go back up to 9:30 morning, 9:30 this morning. Right, where is this at? We're going to start today. Right, so in the morning, right, it's going to be 9:30, right? Obviously, you can see that we have accumulated. We have two accumulation zones here, right? So we've accumulated over here, and we have some accumulation over here, right? What else can you see, right? We have a sweep in here, right? ITM low sweep, right? Because we have this gap, right? We have this gap that we're tapping into. We also have like a monthly gap we're tapping into, right? We have a monthly gap that we're tapping into. So this wouldn't be like an ITM low, but you know what I mean? This would be a, whatchamacallit, a PDR. So we have a liquidity sweep, plus we're tapping into a PDRA, right? So this is obviously manipulation. And this would be the distribution leg. Okay, now we know we're on the distribution leg of the daily, right? Does that really mean we're going to go all the way up here in one day? No. Hey, but that does mean we want to target this high slowly throughout the weeks, months, whatever the fuck, right? Okay. So now that we know we're in like the distribution phase, right, of the market maker like buy model, right? We accumulated, right? We manipulated, and then now we're buying, right? And then we're retesting that while accumulating, right? So obviously we know we want to go higher long term, right? But on our intraday trading, right? So intraday means like day-to-day trading, right? We're not obviously going to just buy here and then hold it to here, right, in one day, right? So intraday, what could we look at to get a trade, right? So we have accumulation, right? We can see that we manipulated over here, right? Oh my God, what did we manipulate into? Blah, 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 right? Wait, right? We have our manipulation here, right? We have our liquidity sweep here, right? And why is this so important? Why is this high important, right? It is a daily high, right? So this is a previous week, previous day high, right? So this high holds more value than a 1 minute high, all that other good jazz, right? So this is a previous week high. Wait, oh my gosh, previous week high, right? So we sweep a previous week high, and then now we're disrespecting a gap, right? Why is it important that we're disrespecting a gap, right? Oh my gosh, we're disrespecting the gap. What to do, right? Okay. Fair value gaps, right, are imbalances. And I don't know how to spell it, but imbalances in the market. So we can use them, right, to see whether we want to respect or disrespect different levels, right? Part of my spelling, but hey. So we can see that we are disrespecting this gap on the daily, right? And then we obviously want to go lower. So guess where we're not going to go, right? We're not going to go to this high. So this is not where we're going to go, right? After knowing that we are disrespecting this gap, right? And obviously, where do we most likely want to go, right? This low that we almost swept over here, right? Since we're displacing, right? And we created a new gap, right? So we created a new gap in here, right? So now that we're in a sell model, right? Lower, not really lower time frame, but now that we know we're in a sell model, right? We're obviously accumulating, manipulated the high, right? We created a gap in here. We could either manipulate this gap or we could just run range low. That's pretty much it, right? So how do we know if we're manipulating the gap or running range low, right? We would obviously go on a lower time frame, right? The 4 hour over here, right? You can see what are we doing on the 4 hour, right? we're starting to accumulate, right? We're starting to accumulate over here, right? We're accumulating, okay? And then what are we doing? We're manipulating a what? A daily low, right? And probably an intermediate daily low. Yeah, this is a ITM daily low, right? Because we have our gap over here, right? And this is our low, right? Our low in the gap, right? So we're manipulating, about to manipulate a daily low. So we have our accumulation, we have our manipulation here, right? So potentially we could go higher towards the daily gap, right? So it's either we take shorts, we can either take the shorts here towards this low, right? Or we can either take the longs after it sweeps out this low and does whatnot, right? Cool. On the hourly, what do we have, right? Some more accumulation here. More accumulation. It created a gap, right? We created a gap in here, and it looks like we want to displace lower. So what do we have to do, right? In this situation, what would we have to do to either go higher or lower, all right, with this gap, right? This is like the do 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 do. All right, if you're done, all right, we would obviously have to respect this gap, right? We'd have to trade into this gap and respect it to go lower, right? So we can manipulate this low and then go higher, right? Or we can just disrespect this gap over here because we barely like kind of swept this, right? So we can either disrespect this, right? Create another gap to continue off of, and we can just trade higher towards the unmitigated daily with this LR, right? So scaling down again, right? On the 15-minute, what do we have? Right? We have, actually, let's mark out this hourly real quick. Okay. On the 15-minute, what do we have? Right, after sweeping this low, we created a gap, and it looks like we respected the gap, right? So now we have manipulated, right? We created a gap, we respect the gap. Okay, we're going higher, right? So this is obviously an indicator of being bullish, right? We would obviously want to long into the unmitigated hourly at least, right? Because we know at least we're going to the unmitigated hourly for sure, since we now, mitigated this gap, respected this gap after sweeping out this low, right? So only 1 minute now. What do we have, right? Okay. Can I just get out of this real quick? Okay. On the 1 minute, what do we have, right? We have accumulation. Cool. We manipulated the gap, right? We manipulated this gap over here, right? So we have our intermediate low, right? And we have our displacement, right? And it doesn't take out this high yet, right? So we could either respect a 5 minute, or like, I don't think there's a 5 minute gap in here. So it can either just like go up here or resweep this low and then go higher. Or, right? We could treat this as the accumulation. All right, we have our unmitigated, and then we could just go lower, target the intermediate low as a range low, and then continue lower towards the daily, right? So these are our two options the market gives us at open, right? So as we play it out, let's see what happens. It looks like this is our accumulation over here, right? We have our manipulation now. Manipulation. Right, now we need to wait for our distribution lower. Right, simple stuff. Right, I like to trade on the 15-second to give me a more precise entry. Right, but if you're like beginner, stick to the 1 minute. It's a little bit easier to find. Right, so now we need to wait for an entry. Right, obviously if it goes higher, right, we have our stop hunt over here. Right, so this is another like intermediate, high, low, whatever you want to call it, sweep, right? And then we're just accumulating. We have another accumulation phase here, so definitely wouldn't want to short, right, in this phase, right? Because what could it either do? It could either just sweep this low out. If it could just sweep this low out, right, this would be your manipulation, right? It could resweep this gap and then go higher, right? So definitely want to wait for another stop hunt in this situation, right? You definitely don't want to enter in accumulation, right? So you'd wait, You get that manipulation there, right? And you could enter off this, right? You would enter off this IFPG up here, right? Why enter off this IFPG, right? It is disrespecting this imbalance. And what did we say about imbalances? They tell us whether we want to disrespect or respect price in that situation, right? You could take this targeting the intermediate low or 930 low, right? Why is 930 low significant? It's obviously the most volatile moment, right, in New York AM session because it's just opening price, right? So that opening price can be really sporadic, really going up and down and whatnot, right? So the volume, right, from this candle, right, would drive a lot of liquidity, right? So we would obviously want to target that or either trade away from that based on, you know what I'm saying, imbalances, whether we're sweeping, whether we're accumulating, blah, 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 right? So we could take this here and then it'll obviously start to distribute, accumulate, whatever. And boom, right? You could take this trade right here, right? So what did it do? We had our accumulation, right? On the 1 minute, we had our accumulation. Holy, we had our accumulation. We had our manipulation, right? And we had our distribution here. Really, really simple, really, really easy stuff once you get a hand, like once you get the hang of just seeing what it looks like, right? Okay, what else do we have though? We have now reswept, right, this low, right? Let me delete this trade over here. Right, let me delete that real quick. We have now reswept this low, right? So we have this 930 low sweep, right? Our volatile sweep, and we have a intermediate low sweep, right? And then what do we have? Some more accumulation. So we have some more accumulation over here, right? And we have our manipulation down here with some more accumulation, right? And obviously, what do we want to see? We want to see distribution higher, right? If we want to go higher. Right, if it respects this 15-minute PD array, right, we'd want to see distribution higher, right, or at least, right, into a gap, right, because it formed a gap, right? And what do we say about even in the short model, right? This is how you would long in a market maker like short model, right? So even if we're shorting, this is how you would long, right? So we have our accumulation, obviously, right? We have our manipulation, right? We'd go down and then we'd retest to go lower, right? So we obviously go lower here. We have a character shift, right? We have a breaker structure here, and then we would have to retest this gap, right? Or at least trade into this gap, right? Why? Because that's how the market moves, first of all, but yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just how the market moves, right? We'd have to retest this imbalance, right, to go lower, right? Build up some more liquidity, right? Touch this gap, go lower, right? So this would be our our continuation little gap, right? So okay, we have a continuation gap, right, that we would like to see it retest, right? If we're really bearish, right, we would retest this and disrespect it, obviously go lower. But if we're bullish, we could just take it up in here, right? So we have our accumulation here, we have our sweeps out, we have now we have our disrespect of this PD array, right? This, we have our disrespect of this PD array, right? We could take this trade open here, right? Target the just the sell model gap, right? And this obviously plays out, right? And from here, right, we would see if we want to be bullish or bearish, right? Because we still have these accumulation highs, right? We still have these accumulation highs we can take out. We still have the daily gap we can take out up here, right? So depending on whether this gap holds or not, right, is whether we target this absolute range low, right? So from here, we can see whether it disrespects or respects the P raise in here, right? And if it obviously respects these PD rates, right, we'd know that we're going to go higher. And if it disrespects it, we obviously know that we're going to go lower. Okay. And it disrespects it here. Okay. You could take this trade short, right, targeting either this range low or the absolute range low, right? So now we have found some shorts, we have found some longs, right? And we obviously know where the market wants to go now. We obviously want to go range low, right? And we'd see whether it played out or not. In this case, it did not end up playing out. Let's see. Yeah, okay, in this case, okay, it just ended up chopping. Yesterday was just like super bad day, right? But we just ended up chopping around. This would have got stopped out. So in this case, you would have got stopped out or break even, depending on how you did it, right? Depending on whether, you know what I mean, you actually like manage your risk and here or whatever, right? After you've seen this chop, right? But that's how you can easily identify like just shorts, buys, right? What gaps you can continue off of, what gaps you can just long short out of, right? Okay. So what are market maker models, right? What are MXMM, right? Basically how the market moves. You can find setups using PDAs, sweeps, liquidity, dirty, right? And see whether I'll make I already have a video on like whether gaps are respecting and just respecting. All right. What are MXMM? Bro, what the fuck is this fucking grammar, dude? Okay, what is MXMM? Basically, okay. So that's basically it, right? I showed you how to identify setups within the market, right? I showed you basically accumulation, manipulation, distribution, right? How you would use it. The only thing you would have to add is PO3 here. Like you could add PO3 here, but I want to make like a separate PO3 video, right? Because I use PO3 a little bit differently, right? I like to target 930 and like see, like actually I'll add it in here. Like I'll add a little bit of hidden sauce, right? So obviously we have 930 over here, right? And we wanted to retrace into 930 because there's an imbalance, blah, blah, blah. I already talked about this, right? But we have 945 opening up here, right? And why is this important? We could just basically short this at 945 open, right? Why could we short this at 945 open, right? Because you obviously know we have our accumulation over here, right? We manipulated. Guess what 945 has to do? Guess what 945 has to do? Yeah, have accumulation, you manipulated. 945's only job is to distribute here. So you could have just took this short off 945's open, right? Would that have been good? Probably not, right? You'd much rather just take this setup over here, right? But you get the same, around the same RR, right? But yeah, so you can tie AMD into the PO3 by just using it like in sync, right? Think of it like just like here, right? So you have AMD, let me space these out, and then we have PO3, right, which is obviously like just the 15-minute candle opens, right? So every PO3, every 15-minute candle open, 15-minute, 1 hour, 4 hour candle open, right? So we have 930 over here, right? Adding on, generating liquidity, right? And then we have this 930 range, right? The 930 range to 945 range, manipulating higher. we have 945 distributing, right? So guess what we're probably going to do? We're going to accumulate, right? What do we have? 1015 do? Accumulate for 10, 1015. What does 1015 do? Manipulates lower, right? 1015 manipulates lower, right? So from 945 to 10, what did we do? Accumulate again. 1015, what did it do? Manipulate lower, right? And then guess what the 1015 to 1030 did? Where is it at? Where are you? 1015 to 1030, guess what it did? It distributed, all right? Distributed where? Higher towards these highs. Cool. That's pretty much it. Like, you can use AMD and PO3 like together like that, right? Obviously seeing whenever it opens, you know what I mean, the open ranges, but I'll talk about that in a different video. It's a little bit more complex, right? It's obviously not just that simple, but yeah. So what is MXXM? Basically how the market moves, whether it goes up or down, right? What could you do to identify these setups, right? You can see imbalances, right? Liquidity sweeps, PDRAs, right? See whether gaps are respecting or disrespecting, right? And basically use that to target what? Accumulation, right? So you want to target accumulation, right? Near a unmitigated gap preferably, right? Because the gaps hold liquidity, right? Cool. That being said, that's pretty much it. That's all I really want to say about this topic, right? There's nothing really much to say, right? Homework for you, if you're just like a new trader, would just be find AMD setups, right? Like this, like you just find accumulation here. All right, we have some accumulation here. All right, so, and then what do we have? Manipulation. Is this distribution, right? This is accumulation, so we'd obviously want to manipulate lower, distribute higher. Right, we have accumulation here, manipulation. So you just basically just be finding these on the charts, right? Find about 10, 15 of these, probably on the 15 minutes, a little bit easier, right? Higher time frames are a little bit easier to like find, right? You could just go on the 15-minute here, find accumulation, manipulation, right? All right, even see like failed AMD setups, right? So we have accumulation, manipulation here, right? But we probably respected a PDRA in here, right? And then what did we do? We distributed lower, right? So this is another accumulation phase up in here, right? So just find these little accumulation, manipulation distributions, right? And basically tie in the daily 4 hour, 1 hour, 15, 1 minute on your live trading. And that's pretty much it, right? But with that being said, I'm a dip.